What's up, everybody, and welcome to TinkTink.org interviews. I'm your host, Josh Wilson, here today with our guest, voice actor, musician, composer, and audio director extraordinaire, Mr. Alexander Brandon. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing just fine. How about yourself? I'm using my announcer voice because I'm in the booth. Better Skype quality, right?
Yeah, let's
What's
hope
up?
so. Not much, man.
Thanks a lot for having me. I
Well,
appreciate it.
thanks for being here. So, you've worked on music and sound in games such as Tyrion, Jazz Jackrabbit, the Unreal series, Narc, and Deus Ex, to name a few. But what got you interested in music and as a profession, and how did that lead into the gaming field?
Well, there's a number of things that got me into music in the first place. The first was the influence of my mother. She's a very musical person herself. My dad's more of a music appreciator, but my mother would sing. And let's see, she would also, she got me interested in choir. So both of those things led to just an overall interest in music. And then eventually, in addition to piano lessons, one of the things that I did was I play a lot of Nintendo when it came out, and right about that time, a friend of mine, Jason Emery, introduced me to Metroid, and it kind of grew from there. I thought that this new kind of music was unique and cool, and I really liked it. It had a purity to it that just nothing else really seemed to have, and it seemed to be more approachable as a means of becoming a composer. So that's how I got interested in that, and I would tape arcade game music from arcades onto little portable cassettes and make mixtapes of game music. Totally geek out on that. And then after that, when the ad-lib music synthesizer card came out in 1987, that enabled for the first time anybody to write music on a computer and actually start the process of composition using piano roll, which is how a lot of composers actually work these days. So that's pretty much the funnel towards how I got started.
So, you said Metroid was an influence, but what is your favorite gaming soundtrack of all time?
Wow, that's a really, really tough question. I'd say, I mean, there's different genres and different historical places that you have and different generations, I suppose I should say, of game music. For older generation game music, I'd say that Metroid from the 8-bit era is my favorite, and then from the sort of more 16-bit, sort of pseudo 16-bit, I guess it was pure 16 for Sega Genesis, not so much so for TurboGrafx. You would have Strider, and that would be my favorite 16-bit generation. And then you would have the start to the CD soundtracks. And from the CD soundtracks, I would say, or the ones that were recorded with Redbook audio or just pure streamed audio, I would say one of them, not all, it's high up there. I wouldn't say it's like number one. There is no number one here, but the Dig comes to mind most readily, as it was a really excellent way of expressing itself in the middle of a bunch of other General MIDI type soundtracks, and Michael Land did that at LucasArts. These days, it's really tough to say. I mean, I dig Halo, I dig Skyrim. One of my favorite modern pieces of the last 10 years is the Morrowind theme, which eventually became pretty much the Elder Scrolls theme overall. So there's tons and tons of game music out there that I really enjoy, and those are just a few.
All right, and you mentioned the Redbook audio stuff. Now, I know older LucasArts games used to use that, and well, with their, for instance, the old Jedi Knight games, you can play the game without a disc, get scratched, whatnot, but you cannot play music without the disc in there, and it was because of Redbook. Now, do you know how
Right.
that works or how to fix it, man?
Well, Redbook is essentially the equivalent of playing a CD, the way a CD is traditionally played with a laser, actually getting the data from the disc itself. So it doesn't. The reason you can play the game is because a certain amount might be loaded into memory or hard disk space and played that way. It does not do the same for the audio. It will keep the audio on the disc, and it'll keep it in whatever format that it has on that disc. And so if you take the disc out, yeah, you're kind of out of luck there. But that was, there was a lot of back and forth between, okay, do we do streamed audio and have the higher quality, or do we do something that could be potentially more interactive, change more with what the player is doing, also give us a lot more space for more music in general, just more notes, to make it less of a repetitive experience. And General MIDI was a solution for that. Mod files were a solution to that. and just compression is overall, but this was Redbook came, not too long before, but definitely before MP3 technology was available, and that's why mods were so prevalent in games like Unreal and let's see, Deus Ex.
So you've been an audio director in a lot of titles. What exactly does an audio director do?
Well, an audio director, first and foremost, is responsible for the quality of audio in the product. And what that means is that they have a certain number of years of experience and they're able to say, well, I don't think that piece of music is appropriate. I don't think that sound is quite punchy enough. I don't think the mix sounds appropriate. I think that the voice acting is too drab or dull or not, not appropriate. Just doesn't sound high enough in quality. And of course, qualitative things are difficult to argue, but it's easy enough to give reference examples of things that you have seen before. That, for example, I could say, okay, let's use Firefly as an example of decent dialogue and conversation, and let's use that in some of our game and some of our directing for some of our cinematic sequences and some of our in-game sequences. And I provide YouTube videos, and we just use examples from that during the directing of the sessions. We try to improve the overall process so that we can iterate faster. And that just essentially what that means is that you get in a film, it's easy enough to go into whatever your environment is for editing and just replace stuff, swap stuff out, and then just render it. Whereas in games, it takes a lot longer to do that. It's a lot more convoluted. There's a lot more tools. There's a lot more variables and considerations. Interactive just means you have so many more options and so many more just things to worry about in terms of what the player might do that you have to be ready for. So one of the audio director's functions is to understand the technology behind it and how to manipulate it in a way that will generate that high level of quality on the depending on where the player is, what the player is doing, and what the mix is doing at any one point in time, and just the kind of audio that's present there, and just how appropriate is it? What do we want the player to feel? What do we want the player to be? How do we want the music to affect what they're doing? How do we want the audio cues to affect their decision making, or what it is that we want them to respond to? All of those things are questions that need to get asked on a daily basis, and just essentially, you just keep iterating, you keep doing stuff over and over again until you get that, wow, okay, that's it. That's that moment that we want, and then hopefully you have success on your hands. But it all stems from how fun the game is in the first place. You can have great audio in a terrible game.
So could you walk us through the process, I guess in a condensed form, because I'm sure it's immensely complex, but the process of creating music and sound for games?
Well, sure. The process of creating, there's a lot of different ways of doing it. And most recently, there was a very interesting lecture by Austin Wintory on his music for Journey, for example. And Journey has a very different sort of soundtrack. It's very ambient in nature. But it also has a good deal of interactivity based on what the player does and different situations. There's a lot of up and down layering and little sort of motifs that will play throughout the game that are just sometimes they're subtle hints, but overall the entire score develops. It starts very sort of sparse and then grows from a sort of more of a synthetic feel into more of a organic and fuller, richer orchestral sound. So with all of that said, of course, the project was also took a long time. So again, that's where the iteration comes into play, the ability to swap things out, the ability to add live performances. So what you start with is a whatever software that you have or whatever instruments you have. You can start with a 4-track recorder and a guitar or a piano or your voice. It really doesn't matter what the instrument is, provided that you decide what it is that you want to do and then test that out and see if it works, and then try something else if you want to. So depending on what your technology is, your musical instrument of choice, or your groups of musical instruments, and the technology that you want to use to record it, you put all that stuff together, and then that process is the same as, say, recording an album or working on a film. It's essentially you have sort of basic concepts that you work from to start with, and as the game develops, gradually you're able to integrate that music into the game in such a way that you can test various things and see how they work and try to figure out better ways of accomplishing the goals that you initially set out to do, or finding out that the goals just weren't the right goals and changing things up and being able to say, okay, I don't want this emotion, I want another emotion, and I don't want this genre, I would like another genre. And just having that flexibility is important. But But that's what I'm doing is I'm really sort of just talking in generalizations here. I mean, as far as like specifics go, there's various tools out there like WWise and Fmod and the upcoming Miles Sound Studio 9, which has some really great features in it, like Timeline, that really does make it seem as though it's more of a film, and in which you can sort of just take individual elements and events and double click on them and then just change the sounds and then go back to the game and hear what it sounds like uh, now that you've made that change. So there's audio engines that you should be familiar with, or at least a composer, if they're really interested in how well their music is going to end up in the game. The integration is at least half of the experience, and how well the music flows together during when the player is actually doing stuff. So understanding all those things, and then being able to actually have an open mind about the kind of music that you want to write, and what music needs to go where. Those are all things that you need to know.
All right. Now you've been doing music and audio and games since the late '80s. How is that process like different compared to creating audio and games today?
Well, let's see. So, I mean, I started with in 1987 is when I started with the ad lib. And technically, my first commercial game project was Jazz 1, a secret level. I asked if I could have a piece of music in a secret level for Jazz Jackrabbit, which the rest of it was by Robert Allen, the great producer, great composer, great all around guy, actually. Um, and he was working with Safari Software and Epic Games at the time. So I asked him, hey, I said, hey, this mod technology is great. I love it. I'd been doing that since 89, 90 or so. And so I presented him with a mod file and I said, could this go in the game because it would be great? And he said, yeah, sure. And then afterwards I had the audacity to say, hey, can I get paid for it? And then and then that amused him a little bit, but I was as green as I could have possibly been, and he paid me a couple of $100. Um, so that was 1994. And so that was a year after I had graduated from high school. And the year after that was when he came back to me and said, would you like to do the score for Jazz 2? And that was the second. So, I mean, along with Tyrion, I think both of those games might have either come out the same year or Tyrion first. And I had started doing the Tyrion music definitely in the late '80s at that point. So technically, I guess that was the start. So yeah, things differ quite a bit. To answer your question, there's these days the tools really aren't the consideration anymore. Like back then, it was all about like, okay, how do we tweak the heck out of whatever tool we're using in order to create the music, and be able to make it sound either realistic or at least just cool. How do we make it sound cool on this in this one focused, laser focused um, compositional environment? Now that environment is just exploded in size. I mean, there's so many different ways of just being able to create really cool sounding music. It's a little harder to create authentic sounding orchestral themes, but it's so much easier than it used to be. And right now, there's just so many people that are all diving in at once, and there's no barriers to entry really. But in getting a halfway decent sounding score, or what people expect would be a halfway decent sounding score, something that just sounds right to people's ears. And so now it's really the challenge is making your music unique with all of the tools at your disposal, as well as knowing the integration tools, that like those engines that I mentioned, and understanding the middleware like Unreal and Unity, and how the games are actually created in the first place to be able to differentiate yourself. It's really about making something unique. And what does making something unique mean? Well, it probably means sitting down and experimenting a heck of a lot and finding something that you really like. Of course, it that's sort of part of what I do. The search to be competitive as a composer is really about that unique quality and what makes you stand out from the crowd. The other aspect to it, which I think is just as important, is what turns you on? What makes you really interested in writing music? What got you into music in the first place? If you wrote a theme from Top Gun because you loved the Top Gun score, that's awesome. That's what fires you up. That's what gets you passionate about writing music. And go and do that. And if that's all you want to do and become awesome at writing Top Gun music, man, go for it. I guarantee you'll probably get hired by a few people that are like, hey, that sounds just like the Top Gun score and I love it and I'll use that for my Top Gun NES remake or whatever it is,
Yeah.
So
So you've mentioned in another interview before that doing audio back in the day, quote unquote, was very similar to programming in assembly language with registers and all that good stuff. Was it?
Oh, well, uh, the guys that preceded me, like Brad Fuller.
Oh, so you haven't had to
Oh no, no,
dabble with
no,
all
no.
that.
I haven't. I haven't. I've written about it. I have never. Well, okay. The first thing that I ever did to write music on a computer was actually write code, and that was in BASIC. And you write a line of code with that says okay, but it's not. It's definitely not registers, and it's not as complex quite as with the stuff that Brad did. But you know, you'd say, here's a note, here's a space, here's a space, here's a note, space, space, here's the initial speed, here's a couple of things. It's all code, and it's just it's more script than say getting down and dirty in assembly and getting and putting more detail in there. But that was in BASIC. On a PC, and it used the PC speaker, and that was the first piece of music that I ever wrote. My friend Jason was writing pieces on the Apple II using, I think it's Apple Talk or AppleSoft or a program. John Romero would be kicking himself if he heard me because he's an Apple fan and he would know exactly what I'm talking about. He'd be like, no, it's this. So yeah, I mean, he was writing. You could get more than one voice on the Apple, and my friend Jason was doing that around the same time. This must have been the mid '80s. But before that, you know, like early '80s, even late '70s, I think. You know, guys like Brad Fuller, Brian Schmidt, a couple of other people that I've met, and a lot of other people that I haven't, were yeah, they would get into the hardware itself for arcade machines. They would decide, okay, just exactly how does this need to work. The I don't know if you've read the particular article on the IASIG website, but on iasig.org, I wrote about how Brad Fuller wrote some stuff for some Atari games by using a dumb terminal hooked into a 300 baud modem, and that would be connected to a VAX. I don't know if the VAX was the dumb terminal or if the VAX was the actual processing unit, but essentially you have just one processing unit or one dev system that the whole team had to use. I mean, Brad would have to wait and write his stuff on paper, his code out on paper before he would be able to get access to the terminal that would access the dev unit to write the music for the game. And that would all be through, you know, registers and accessing the hardware directly and things like that for things like Blasteroids and Marble Madness. So yeah, those I consider hardcore, insane geniuses for writing decent music using this technique. I mean, that's just something that was the earliest state at which there was the biggest barrier to entry, and almost no rational person that would consider themselves a creative would sit down and go, this is how I want to write music. But they did it, and they were passionate about it. And honestly, those people are still working today. Brad Fuller works, I believe, at Leapfrog. Brian Schmidt still does his own independent stuff. He runs a conference. He's doing some stuff for Zynga. And it's just amazing these guys have lasted this long doing whatever it is. But at the same time, there's also guys that got into it because it was such a small community, and they shared, you know, this knowledge nobody else had, and now it's just exploded so much that they're like, oh geez, it's mass market. I'm getting out of here because it's just way too much, which I don't blame them for either. Sorry, I kind of went off there a little bit, but
Oh, that's fine. So, is there any challenge in creating, I guess, uncommon sounds for objects that don't necessarily exist in our world, like giant, crazy laser weapons, robots, or creatures and stuff like that?
oh, definitely, definitely. I mean, the we all have what we've heard in the past. You know, we put Ben Bird on a pedestal because he was able to up the notch of sound design in such a an exponential way that it seems as though he can't be topped. But the fact is, he can. I mean, you can create stuff that really does sound unbelievably amazing. The real trick is the experimentation and finding that stuff and being able to call it out in such a way so that it is pretty much singular. I'm sure you probably have noticed that the same sounds that were singular for the original for 4, 5, and 6 in Star Wars are still the sounds that you recognize the most in episodes 1, 2, and 3. And I guarantee you, at least I'm pretty darn sure, that you probably can't call out a sound from 1, 2, and 3 that was as iconic as the 4, 5, and 6 sounds. Can you think of one?
Jar Jar was annoying, if that counts as a sound.
Right. See, that's the thing. You're able to highlight a negative,
Yeah.
which yeah, he's definitely annoying. But I bet you can't say, okay, the sound of the princess's um, transport ship in the beginning of episode 2 before it blows up sounds like a combination of something. It sounds like an old school bomber combined with sort of a new synthy type sound, right? Which is what they did, and they called that out in some of the B-roll and the interviews. However, it's not something that when you hear it, you don't think of TIE Fighter. You know, TIE Fighter is just it's the thing that you think about when you think about fighter ships or just ships in general. Because he used an elephant scream for that. So it's like, uh, coming up with these things is definitely not easy. It's certainly possible, and it really just takes a lot of work going back and forth. Like I said, that iterative process, being able to just say, okay, that doesn't quite work. Let's tweak it. Let's try something else. Let's add some sweetener from here and go out and do some field and Foley recording for this. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's just like any other creative process. It's just something where you have to have that sort of thing that, for a lot of people, there's a certain thing that does click when it comes to a sound that is unique and satisfying and appropriate for whatever it is that you're seeing or interacting with. Um, that click is really what I consider to be what we all, as professionals, need to aspire to. It's just like you've got to, until something clicks, you just got to keep working on it.
Have you yourself had any funny or weird, unusual ways of obtaining sound effects?
Let's see. Well, most recently, I might have done this in the last thing. My oldest son, Nicholas, he's 8 years old. Uh, excuse me. He can get a little overwrought depending on certain circumstances. And in one case, I was working in my home studio here, and he walks into my office and says, "Daddy, I broke something," and he was almost in tears. He was very, very upset. And I went in and I noticed that there was a picture that Jeanette, my wife, had framed of him as a baby, and he had stepped on it because it was on the floor. I don't even think he put it on the floor. I think it was there and he stepped on it, and the glass had broken. Uh, and he's like, he was really, really upset. I said, "Well, you didn't just jump on it, right? You stepped on it by accident." He's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." So it was like, after he calmed down, and I just wanted to explain to him, I said, "No big deal. It was an accident. Let's just make sure you don't get hurt by the glass." I picked it up, and I noticed that it had this cool sound that, even though it wasn't a weird way of obtaining it, it was very close to what the sound that we needed. You might have seen an Aliens Colonial Marines, which is a project we're working on right now with Timegate and Gearbox. There's a scene where you're in an umbilical in between two military ships, the Sephora and the Sulaco, from the second film from Aliens. And as you're walking from the Sephora to the Sulaco in this umbilical, this little tube made of glass and metal, there's an explosion which makes the umbilical start to crack, and you see these splinters go across. And so I was like, "Hey, this is perfect. My son just gave me the most awesome opportunity." So I go into the booth that I'm in right now, and I had that picture frame, and I sort of bent it back and forth and moved the glass with my hand so that you get the type sound that you have. And that's just one example. There's other examples that I can remember. One off the top of my head isn't even me. It's Kurt Larson. He's working now at Nihilistic Software in Marin County. He used to be the lead singer of Information Society, 80s band, had some hits, and he started working video games. One of the examples he used for an instrument, I think it was an instrument, was he dropped a lid from a can of paint on a table and downsampled it, or actually pitched it down, like, I don't know, 24 or 25 semitones, and then just used that in a piece of music that he had. So there's all kinds of, you can get sound from anywhere, and a lot of people that I know can be pretty crazy about bringing around little recorders and capturing things. I find that it's really difficult to constantly capture and then organize it. It winds up being a full-time job unless you've got a major studio and you've got somebody that sees with you eye to eye on creative stuff, and they're able to take all the stuff you capture, or they go out and capture stuff and they create a library themselves and you pay them to do it. If I could, I would definitely do that. But there's guys like Hans Zimmer that pay interns, like an army of interns, to like go out and find new sounds and help him discover new sounds and organize his library. Lucky sod. But yeah, there's all kinds of stuff you can do.
Nice. So you've done voiceovers, quite a few games, I guess, including Deus Ex, Invisible War, Thief, Deadly Shadows, Alpha Protocol, DC Universe Online, and Skyrim. But how has being a voice actor compared to being the man like behind the music and the sounds? And do you prefer doing voiceovers or actually creating the music?
Oh, that's a good question. I really like both. I think the two things that I wanted to do growing up, one of them was become an actor, and I think I got that bug from my mother. My dad kept telling me that my mother could have been an amazing actress and that she amazed people at college. And I think she does have quite a good skill at acting, particularly classical style, something on stage, Shakespeare, just and there's other modern plays that she was in college that she was very good at. So I think I got the bug from that. It just or it just came, it was part of my genes. And I love films to the point where I would memorize them, and I would drive my parents. I still drive my wife nuts, quoting films. So um, so yeah, and as far as music goes, it's just music affects me emotionally, and it has since I first heard pop music and Mozart as well. My parents gave me the classical and Baroque, romantic and modern genres, and the radio would with Mr. Mister's Kyrie Eleison, which was the first pop song I ever heard. Yeah, all of a sudden there was this, oh wow, this is different stuff, and I like it. I really like it. Um, so that got me into music. So I don't know if I have a preference. Um, and as far as like being different from the audio direction thing, I think the direction comes from my dad. I think that, oh, well, he's was and is a business consultant, and he's worked with some major companies like IBM um, over the years, and he's worked at NASA. He worked for the World Bank as a consultant, but he has a much more technical mind than my mother. He's been into computers since practically computers were invented. He used to work on punch card machines, and so over the years he became more interested in things like mathematics, and considers himself a mathematician. And I'm not quite the math guy.
He sounds like a
Never was.
brave man because math scares me.
Yeah, well, he's. I mean, it's really, yeah. It's dependent on the kind of mindset that you have. Some people that get into math, it turns them on, just like music turns on creative types. So for solving problems, uh, oddly enough, there would be moments in which I would feel a desire to do nothing except work on math problems until I solved them. And I think, maybe that came from my dad or what, but I think that there's a shared passion for trying to work your way through problems and discover new things, and perhaps, even come up with new things. That's a creative aspect as well. But yeah, I think that the audio direction, um, and I've also done some production work as well, most recently on a game, Garden Quest, which is due out any day now. It's a social network game. Yeah, that all came from my dad. The desire to have, certain amounts of organization, helping people do their jobs better, create a process that people will be able to communicate effectively and be able to get their jobs done, as easily as possible during a project, and make sure a project stays on schedule. All of those things.
Now you've mentioned Garden Quest and Aliens Colonial Marines, but are there any other new products coming out that you're lending your talents towards, be it voiceovers, music, or sound, that you can talk about?
Well, yesterday I did another session for DC Universe with by being General Zod and Black Lightning and Black Adam. As far as new projects, the newest stuff that we have, other than Aliens Colonial Marines, is mostly iPhone and online related. There's a project we're working on. It's called Animatopia. We're doing music for that, excuse me, and sound design. And that's by the same people that did Weetopia, Sojo Studios. And the Weetopia became something of a phenomenon. It was featured on the Ellen DeGeneres show. Um, and so they wanted us to come back and do music and sound for their Animatopia game, which is similar. It's a real world project or relative social network game, to where when you play the game, and as you either donate real money or as you play more of the game itself and you get virtual money, you're able to donate joy, as they call it, which translates at some point into dollars. Like in Weetopia, it was about causes like feeding the hungry, and helping children in Africa, and building homes for Habitat for Humanities, and things like that, and cleaning up neighborhoods. Brilliant idea. I mean, it's, play a game and save the world, that kind of thing. I mean, they literally put that into practice. And Animatopia is similar. It's for animal conservation. As you play the game, you help research with endangered species, and you help with breeding programs for animals that are endangered, and protection programs and studies and Earthwatch and all things like that. So anyway, that's one project. Another is which should be out, I'm not sure exactly when, is called it's for the Qualcomm Mobile Snapdragon platform. And it really seems like a pretty high-end game. I would say that it's high-end as far as an action title goes. It has pretty good graphics. But it's called Release the Beast, Reign of Amira. and my wife Jeanette does some of the vocals on that for the lead character that you play. This chick with a giant sword, and so that's sort of a top-down gauntlet style game. And other than that, we're bidding on projects all the time, and are always on the lookout. And one of the things that we're working on in order to hopefully make that happen is we're working on a Unity demo that sort of has a Portal 2 feel. You're in this white room, and when you walk around, you feel it's sort of like you're wearing dress shoes, and you can hear the reverb of your footsteps in the room, like you're in just this sort of massive, shiny, white tiled room. And you get to push buttons and different things happen. Like you can see a monster will appear and make noises, and then you click it again and it vanishes, and that's our monster demo. And then you walk over to another wall, and then the surface of the surface changes to wood, and you can walk around on a wood surface and hear the different sounds of that. Changes to a metal surface, and you're given a hammer, and you can bang on things, and that's sort of a physics demo. Then you go to another wall and push a button, and you can hear different examples of music and how they change. And you push another button on the music wall, and then a radio appears and makes the music that you're listening to in both of your ears go into a little stereo system so that you can hear the difference between what localized and just purely in the channel music sounds like. And then another wall, you get to push a button, and then the overall size of the room gets bigger and smaller, so that as you push the other buttons, you can hear different reverb sounds. So that's our effort towards an interactive audio demo that I don't think has been really attempted before. And so hopefully it'll get some attention. I'll see if I can write up some stuff for some various game magazines and show it off to all my audio director buddies and see what happens there. But I have to say it's very competitive right now. There's a lot of people in the industry that'll work for hardly anything, and a lot of people are utilizing those resources in that way, which is fine. It gets a lot of people experience, but in another way, it also makes it difficult for people that have been in the industry for a while. We might charge a little bit more because we have more experience, more skill, can get higher quality. But there's particularly for the smaller projects, which can be bread and butter. They'll be like, we'll just get it from a library, for example. So that's like I said, it's challenging, but again, differentiating and constantly thinking of ways in order to increase your market and work for new clients. That's kind of what we're on the lookout for right now.
All right. Now, the original Deus Ex, you played a huge part in creating the music for the game, and the theme song has become quite recognizable. How did you make it? How long did it take to create? And did you know you had something special when you completed it?
Well, I knew that the game was going to be big. I had thoroughly enjoyed System Shock, and so the opportunity to work with Warren on anything really was huge for me. And so therefore, when it came to the theme, I was in my apartment in at the time Boulder, Colorado, and I sat down. I don't even think I had a bed frame. I think I had a box spring and a mattress. I sat down on my bed and just started humming and recorded, and it came up with it took maybe 2 or 3 iterations of humming into a recorder, but then I came up with the theme that way, and then I wrote it all down, and I tried to integrate sort of sci-fi elements into this sort of orchestral theme, and because I wanted it to be a hummable theme, something that you could really recognize. And so then when it came out that was the case, I think that really worked. But at one point, Warren wanted it changed. He said that I think it sounds too much like bagpipes, or it's just something about it I'm just not grabbing me. But then another couple of months later, I hadn't had time to really get to it, and he said, like, you know what? Don't change anything about it. I can't get it out of my head. So yeah, and that Yahtzee did a version of it. It's great. Yeah, there was a Penny Arcade. Was it Penny Arcade? It wasn't Penny Arcade. I'm sorry. It was the thing that was like Penny Arcade on GameSpy. I don't remember.
I cannot recall myself.
Yeah, it's a guy that looks like Tycho, but it's not Penny Arcade. It was another cartoon or comic that sort of copied Penny Arcade. But there was a guy that did this. This guy that has his hands in the air saying, "Let's sing the Deus Ex theme," and so things like that coming out, it was pretty cool.
Right. So, looking back on it now, is there anything at all that you wish you could have added to, taken away, or tweaked in the theme song for Deus Ex?
Oh man, it with the tools that I have now, I don't think the theme would differ that much, but it would be recorded live, even better, in fact, than we did for Deus Ex: The Conspiracy for PlayStation 2. Um, it would have a bit more articulations in it. It would have just a little bit more in the way of counterpoint, and the synthesis would be a little more sophisticated and textured and organic. Otherwise, I think the basic framework would be identical. I don't think I would change too much about it.
So you apparently have had some ideas of what you'd like to do with it. Do you think that ever come to be? Um,
Well, I mean, with all the avenues that I've been thankfully introduced to through good friends like Jimmy Henson and the great people at OC Remix, I think that there is an opportunity to do a Deus Ex full on remix album. Now there has been a Deus Ex remix album put out by OC Remix by several really great composers that have made some amazing pieces. Zircon and his wife Jillian Aversa, for example, come to mind. Um, I think they did a wonderful job, and there was a while in which they were trying to get it officiated through IDOS as something that was more official with the release of Human Revolution. There were some issues with it, I think, and it's easy to sort of get confused and think that somebody just really wants to only focus on their product and not draw attention away from it. But honestly, just the fact that it got made, I think, was great. Um, but I've reconnected also with Michiel, who has done what is now, other than the title theme, the most played on YouTube piece, which is the UNATCO theme, and also which showed up most prominently in Human Revolution. We're going to do a piece together for an upcoming album. It's called Just Fun, and it's going to be Deus Exy. And Jimmy Henson has also been invited to collaborate with us on that because Jimmy has done some excellent work with remixes of my stuff. We did a remix together called Siren Synapse for the Hong Kong theme for the original game, and his talent blows me away. So those are all things that are in the works. As far as like the original title theme, I think one day I'll probably put a Kickstarter out there and just say, hey, because I don't know if you've noticed, but Chris Hulsbeck for for his Turrican score has raised $75,000 to do an anthology, which blows my mind. I mean, like, I'm going to give this some time to think about it and really come up with something. But
people pay for what they want to hear, I guess.
Oh my gosh, it is unbelievable. I mean, if somebody, I mean, I'm sure that if I did like an Unreal Deus Ex combo, I might be able to come up with something like that. But sadly, I mean, not sadly, but unfortunately, it's just that would be up to Epic and IDOS, and that you need permissions. I have a feeling that the Turrican themes are ones that he in some way has ownership of now, because I believe his company is the one that actually did it. I don't know if they published it, but anyway, yeah. However, he got the rights. I mean, that's it's just wonderful, and I mean, like, I love those themes, so I think it's great that he's got the opportunity to do some live recording and come up with something custom. But yeah, I would like to do that someday, just not for another few years at least.
Now, as with all games, due to lack of time, money, etc., stuff gets cut. And now, were there any songs for the original Deus Ex that you composed, but it didn't make it into the final game? And if so, do we ever be able to hear them?
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure everything that I wrote and that Michiel wrote and Dan Gardape, who's another composer, wrote a couple of themes. There was even Brian Rudge, a very good friend of mine, who he's the one that engaged me on Garden Quest, as a matter of fact. So wonderful fellow. He contributed a very good theme, which he never even showed up in the credits. I feel pretty bad about that. But I think everything that we wrote got used in some way. And so having said that, I do get mails from and requests from people saying, I'd like to know all the detail that you have about this particular Unreal theme or this particular Deus Ex theme. And they know far more about the score than I can remember. They've got details down to, there's this version and that version, and this showed up in this build of the game, and that showed up in that build of the game. And of course, my only response is, well, it was a long time ago. I can't really, I don't have that level of detail, but it's great. I'm gratified to see that there's so much passion out there for it. But yeah, I'm pretty sure everything's in there. Having said that, in the back of my mind, I'm like, maybe I should go and and listen to my backups and see
Alright.
see if there's anything that I could put out there as a unused, because technically I would own the rights to those, and I would be able to put them out. But no, I think pretty much everything is in.
Alright. So, were you surprised and or happy about the original Deus Ex theme and the UNATCO theme being in Human Revolution?
Well, yeah, I think that the honor, the guy whistling the Deus Ex theme, and then the use of the Deus Ex theme at the very end,
Right.
um, after the credits, all of those things were great. I think that Mike McCann made an excellent score, and Steve Skripowski and I had some conversations while during the development of the game, and I think that they honored the original score quite well. And in so many ways it was its own thing. I mean, there's really not that much in the way, even artistically or gameplay wise, too much that directly takes from the first two. And the same goes for the music. It exists as an independent project, which clearly has lineage to the first two. And there's the title and everything, and there's the upgrades, and there's the ability. So like the overall gameplay framework. But I think that as far as just taking stuff from the original and either remixing it or redoing it, I don't think there's very much of that anywhere across the board, which is good, because it means that in some ways I think the music was honored maybe a little bit more directly than artwork or AI or any of the other features, which just it's a testament to how people really enjoy the first score.
Right. Because I mean, for Deus Ex Invisible War, there was kind of I guess, a remix ish of the original theme, and I was expecting for Human Revolution that they would do the same thing, and they didn't. And like I was a little upset, but then started listening. I was like, this is actually a very good score. But when your original theme played at the end of the credits, it just brought it all together. I was happy.
It's interesting you mentioned that. A lot of people appeared to have that reaction, that were fans of the original score. If you were a big fan of the original score, there was a little disappointment in not enough of the theme itself being used or reused until the end, at which point people responded to the YouTube, when somebody posted the credits and then held it there while the theme played, and then there's the comments are like, well, yeah, now that this theme is in there, I can rest easy or something like that. And I was like, well, yeah, I have to admit, if there's one thing that I would do slightly differently, it's just that I understand that they've got this Vangelis-ish, much more subdued, yet it does rise and fall with the action soundtrack. I think you don't remember that much. It's more of a bed of emotion that gets created, which I'm sure was created on the outset as a goal. Like I said, you have your goals and you iterate on those goals. And I think they achieved that very well. But one of the things that has changed more from the first to Human Revolution is that the second one, Harvey Smith, the lead designer, said, I don't want it to be as in your face as the first one. I want it to be more like Thief. I want it to be more ambient. I want it to be less in your face. And the problem is that the first one had embedded itself so deeply with the themes that people were disappointed. And then in Human Revolution, they were disappointed again, because even though it was rich and very well produced and created this sort of this sweeping emotion, a set of emotions that they really didn't have before. I'll be honest. I think that you look at the trailer, and then as you're playing the game, there's emotions that get created with the rising and the falling of the soundtrack, that I don't think really exist that much for the first two, mainly because of the era that they were in, but also, it's just, the production values weren't quite there. So, yeah, it's great that people still, I'm amazed that there are people that say, well, this can't compare to the original score. The original score is better. And I really think it's like comparing apples and oranges. I think that the Human Revolution score does a wonderful job at what it does. And it's just that it's not, there are certain things about particularly the first score, less so with the second score, that are generated, that are created thematically and presented so that people can remember them, that just isn't really done. But again, that wasn't the goal, and I think they achieved another goal brilliantly.
So, is there anything you'd like to say to the fans of your work out there?
Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you keep doing it.
So, would you like to also say anything to people out there looking to get into the gaming field who are focused on music and sound? Like, what does it take and all that good stuff? Any tips?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I tell everybody is join the Game Audio Network Guild gang. I'm on the board of directors. I'm one of the people that was on the original launch committee and when Tommy Tallarico started it. And I've been there ever since, mainly because it's a great resource to be able to network. That's why the network is part of the name, Game Audio Network Guild. And its guild functionality is still being refined. You know, the idea is we're supposed to take people that are interested in getting into the industry and train them to a certain level. And again, there's membership levels, right? There's bronze, silver, gold. But you know, it's not exactly certification. It's mainly how many games have you done. It doesn't necessarily mean you've done a great job or you can be classified as skilled in one particular area the way they used to, or the way they still do with electricians and plumbers and that sort of thing. So, well, that's still something that we keep coming back to. I think that joining as a student membership, which is either $50 or $75 or something like that, gets you access to a lot of different opportunities, and as well as discounts and forums and the means of attending events like the GDC. Like there's the awards ceremony, there's the town hall, and then there's various events in different communities, different parts of the United States, and even internationally that take place. So joining gang is one good thing, and IASIG is another. The Interactive Audio Special Interest Group is a great organization for just essentially presenting your own issues and creating working groups and trying to solve problems that are a little bit more technically geared. You know, they've done very well at standards like the downloadable samples and IXMF and things like that. So those two organizations are good. There's a number of books out there, and other than that, it's you know, a lot of people will ask questions. I may not have time to answer all of them, but I'm always happy to try. And again, joining that organization, reading the books, and getting into the technology, which is pretty much out there for free, like Unity, UDK, and Wise, WWise, whatever you want to call it, Fmod, and Miles are all pretty much out there available to download and use and learn. So if you learn all those things, that gives you another leg up to create an amazing demo, or you know, do a screen capture of your work and then send it off to an audio director and impress the pants off of them and get hired, that sort of thing.
Before we close out, is there anything else you'd like to say?
But I want to say thanks for the interview.
Thanks for doing it.
I appreciate it.
No problem. All right, well, everybody, since you're already here, you might as well check out our YouTube channel, and be sure to visit TinkTink.org for all your gaming needs. And don't forget to be on the lookout for Alex's upcoming work. And special thanks to our guest, Mr. Alexander Brandon, for talking with us today. This has been Josh Wilson, and as always, thanks for listening to TinkTink.org interviews.